A US official says that the United States believes a surface-to-air missile brought down the Malaysian airliner. President Barack Obama has vowed to support a full and prompt investigation into the cause of the disaster. Well, let's cross live now to Washington and speak to Sky's US correspondent Greg Milam. Good to see you there, Greg. What more in terms of US reaction are you hearing?
Well, President Obama is actually just touching down now back in Washington. He's been in New York on fundraising trips. We know that in the last few hours he spoke to the Dutch Prime Minister to express his condolences on behalf of the American people, with so many of those who've died being from the Netherlands. But interesting what he also said in that phone conversation, promising support for a prompt, full, credible, unimpeded international investigation, clearly putting some pressure on those in the region to play their part in allowing that investigation to take place. He was quite measured when he spoke earlier on today, when not much was known about what had happened, or certainly the full picture wasn't known. His Vice President Joe Biden much more strident, talking about this plane being blown out of the air and reflecting, I think, some of the anger that people feel here, with some possibility that some of those on board were American. And US intelligence services very clear in their minds that this was a surface-to-air missile that was used. They've seen evidence from radar and satellite tracking that that was the case. What they're looking at now is where it came from, and they believe they will be able to trace back from what they have to see where this missile was fired from, and then the questions as to who fired it. But it's an issue, of course, that they've tried to tackle, the issue in Ukraine with sanctions until now. There will be pressure for Barack Obama, at least, to say what he's going to do next if, as they believe, this was some elements of those pro-Russian rebels that were responsible for this.
Greg, any indication as to whether US citizens were on board? We haven't heard anything bar very early rumours when this incident first happened that they could have been, but now things seem to have gone quiet in confirming US passengers on this flight.
Yeah, there were reports very early on that as many as 23 of those on board were American citizens. The US State Department hasn't been able to confirm those numbers, and there's been very little mention of those numbers since. And of course, we've had those very detailed numbers that Robert was talking about that have come from Schiphol Airport of a breakdown of the passenger numbers, but no further confirmation from here in the US. Of course, they will be looking very carefully because it will impact how the US gets involved in this investigation. Should there be Americans on board, for example, then the FBI would automatically want to take part in any investigation because they'd be investigating the deaths of Americans, even if it were on foreign soil. The National Transportation Safety Board, the air accident investigators here in the US, similarly would want to get involved. They may well get involved anyway, but if there are US citizens on board, that would change the picture significantly and would certainly raise the pressure on the Obama administration to tell the American people what they plan to do if indeed Americans have died in this tragedy.
OK, Greg Milam, we'll leave it there. Thank you for that.